Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Uniquely Designed. I am so happy that you are here and that you're connected and that you are tuned in. Do me a favor while you're tuning in, go ahead and share this with your friends, that they can be my friends, and your family, so they can be my family, and we can connect together. So I appreciate you. I have the distinct honor today. As y'all know, I get to talk to wonderful people. I think I probably made the podcast more for me, more other than for you, because I really enjoy having the conversations that I have and introducing you to some of the wonderful people that I know and so honored to be connected to. And so today is no different, that I get the opportunity to speak to one who is a champion of others, really is constantly bringing out the best in others, a leader of leaders, not just a leader of followers, but a leader of leaders. She is an entrepreneur, one who has that edge to be able to see what needs to be created. She is a pioneer in many areas. And most importantly, she is a friend of mine for over 20 something years. So that means she's older than me. So it is my privilege and my honor to present to you my friend Lettie. How are you today, friend?
Excellent. Thank you so much. I don't know if I liked how you slid that older than thou in there. However, I will take it because guess what? I don't look like what I've been through.
Come on, come on, come on, come on. We have known each other for a very, very long time. Um, I don't even remember exactly where we were or when we met. I don't remember exactly. Do you remember? I don't remember exactly.
I'm gonna have to say that I don't remember the exact moment, but I do remember the era in which I think we were both right in pursuit of our careers, our adulting, our lives as we now are sitting in them, right? And so, which is so amazing to know that you journey along with people for a season, but there are some within that season that you are in it for a lifetime. And I think our connection has certainly been one of a lifetime, right? And holding one another accountable, holding space for one another. And I know that that certainly is a moment of God, right? I'll always show up with my faith as the catalyst of all things, all good things, right? And so I don't remember the exact moment, but I know it was during a season that certainly I think we both needed each other.
Yeah. What I have noticed, and what sticks out to me, basically even what you said about, God connects, and I do believe in that, because unfortunately, there are many people that I have met that I do not remember. So, and I hate that. But that is, I guess, a part of what we're going to talk about it as it relates to leadership and being an influencer, being in front of people. I do remember from as long as I've known you, you always had almost a few steps ahead of everyone else. And that I don't mean that in a better than, but you were always pushing the needle or always pushing forward. You have never been one, as long as I've known you, to bite your tongue or to be one that anyone ever has to guess what you're thinking. You're going to say it. So I wanted to ask, have you always um, had that innate drive from childhood on to do what no one else is doing, to move in direction no one else was moving? Did you always kind of look at you when you look back, like, you know what, I was always a little different than everybody else?
Well, absolutely. And I laugh about that because the name of my company is Gifted by Design, Leadership and Consulting, right? And did I always view it as a gift? I did not, right? I thought that was the way of the world, the way we were all conditioned, right? Um, the way we were supposed to operate, right? We, in the vein of making things good, better, best. Um, I do remember as a child, my mom always being a driver, a pusher of all things, right? Knowing and helping us to cultivate the gifts that we had within us. And I didn't know what that gift was, but I knew early on, I knew that it was something. And do I take it for granted? I do, because I think, even still now, I feel like, oh, well, this is what we should be doing, right? Or but really, as I've come to know my leadership style is that it's rooted in my values. And what I know is that we were shaped based on our values, as kids, my siblings and I. And what I know is that because of that, it puts you in a place of honoring the integrity of yourself, but also honoring the integrity of others. And all of that within the context of, again, I run a for-profit business, but the foundation of my business is my faith. And so, when I think about my values of justice, integrity, honesty, that's really where the straightforwardness comes from. I feel like we do people a disservice by sugarcoating or acting as if things are not so. That's not honoring our relationship or the authenticity of who we are and who God has called us to be. And so ultimately, I just feel like, my gift is to be strategic, is to be intentional, to be straightforward, and to honor that and to honor them, right? I mean, I feel like we live in a society that people need us to see the honesty and the transparency and the authenticity of what they bring to the table rather than trying to cultivate them and shape them into something that they're not.
So, all of that being true, from you always being that honest person, this is what we need to be doing type of person, did you have um friction with your friends growing up? Like, were they
Oh, I still
like here
have.
she goes? I mean, I want to go back to the origins, like, and here she goes. She's gonna say something, Were you that?
That's
Were you that
exactly.
one? Were you that person?
Yes. Oh well. Oh, here she go. My husband still says that to this day. You know, and it's funny because you laugh at yourself too because you recognize who you are, who you have become, and in different seasons, right? And I grew up around older people. I come from a pastoral family, very public family. So, it was always we speak truth to power and power to truth. And, I've always been I think part of my history is that I grew up with an alcoholic father, right? My mom and dad divorced. I was at the age of 3 to 4, but it's a very prevalent memory in my mind of my dad being abusive towards my mom, right?
You remember that at three or
And
four?
yeah, like trauma runs deep, right? And so we have to be able to have those defining moments so that when we're triggered, we know how to do something about it. And I know that because now as I work with organizations and individuals, there are moments where I'm triggered and I have to be able to pinpoint that so that I could quickly shift my mindset. And so I think, and my mom, even though she's an outspoken person, but there is, because she's a pastor, right? And so, but there are some elements to her personality where I feel like she had to suppress or hide or the value of exchange, the value proposition or exchange that she was necessarily needing to promote her and boost her to where she is now. Like my mom, she went back to school, right? She went back to school after, being in an abusive marriage, etc. And so I just feel like for me, like the wisdom, number one, is a gift, but it's also necessary to be honest with people. And sometimes, Mario, to be honest with you, am really I question myself if I am being too honest, or how can I cultivate my emotional intelligence more so that I am landing with people in a way that they can receive it. And I'm still working through that, right? I'm still working through that, as a leader, as a business leader, as a community leader, as a an influencer. Is something that I still work through and struggle with. So
How do you know, or I mean, when you said being too honest, how does one even gauge if that's too much honesty? Is it on the side of the person receiving it to say, hey, I can handle that? Or is it maybe I'm giving you too much right now for you to be able to process?
both. Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's both. Like there are times where, especially now, because I lean so much on emotional intelligence, and personality assessments. So, there are times where I know that maybe, I could have shaped or formulated, the context of how I delivered it in a different way because they may be a processor. I'm not a processor. I am a do it, then process type of person, right? Or say it and then, oh, that may have not necessarily been the best way to say that, right? Or, I have found myself, in this teaching vein where I'm really becoming more curious. That's where I am now. I'm very curious around like, okay, how did you interpret what I said, right? And how is it landing with you in order for you to take action as a result of what I said, right? So, reading the body behavior, um, allowing for space and respect of the humanity piece of it, right? Because oftentimes, we have, in my estimation, we have become a community or a society that really influences humans doing the work, or humans always doing rather than humans being. And I think for me, centering that this is a human being who is very complex and that has dealt with their own set of beliefs and traumas and situations, and so how to did they arrive to the perspective that they landed to, and what is my job or what is my opportunity to be able to help them to grow into their best self.
This sounds like counseling, like, just doing the entire, like how you broke down and approached not just an organization, but maybe the leader or the team of a whole organization was like a analysis, like you are like sculpting
Well, it
out.
is.
All I saw was like this doctor looking at this, like I want you to point out this thing right here, that's a lot. I mean, it's great, but I wanted to have this conversation because to go behind the mind of leadership and what it really is like, when some people think that you just ascribe a title and get a LinkedIn or a Linktree thing, and then you start to become a consultant, and then you start to go out and book yourselves to speak at places and all that type of stuff. When it's much more just what you just said, that's a whole commitment piece, of really thinking through and not just looking at someone's paper, because a lot of people look great on paper.
Mhm.
And I wanted to go in that direction because you being a PK, of which we have to get there before, thank you, Lord. Being a PK, being in church, faith-based, how would you say that even gave you some type of scope of the need for leadership, because we see or have seen sometimes, I mean, it's evolving and changing, but sometimes we did see kind of one person leading everything. And sometimes some of that leadership stuff was just via the pulpit or via the stage. It wasn't necessarily development or teams and organizational structures. Some of it, some were, but how has just your earliest memories of growing up, seeing the need for development or leadership, even in the faith community?
Yeah, so good question. So, I will say that my personal background is that um, one thing I know about me, there's two things. I know I've been gifted, and I know that it is my responsibility to grow. Okay. So, and the reason why I start answering the question in that way is because my godmother, God rest her soul, Bertha Garrett, she was the church secretary for the church that I originated out of. So I didn't go to St. Stephen until I was 10, but I was at another church called Good Shepherd Baptist Church down on 19th and Jefferson in Louisville, Kentucky. And my grandfather was one of the associate pastors at that church. And I say that because I read some of my earliest memories was her putting me in her secretary office and asking me to type notes, meeting notes, or to organize the tithing envelopes, or just a very hands-on administrative posture. Okay, I mean early. I mean really, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5. Right, I was very very young, and her always having this conversation around leaders are readers, leaders are readers, leaders are readers. And my mom too, on the opposite side of that, my mom again has always been a disruptor, and it's a good disruptor, but she has been a disruptor of systems. And where she got that from, honestly, I do not know. If I sat and thought about it, perhaps maybe my grandmother was a disruptor, my grandparents were disruptors. I don't know. That doesn't set as a face forward value for me. But my mom always was very intentional about the disruption and making sure that we do things in a very systematic way, right? And painting a message and a narrative of that, you're gifted, you are more than enough, you are, you are talented, you are skillful, you are, and just always, building me up with that. And so when I think about how that influenced me as a leader, it then takes me to, this justice framework that I always have led with, right? Looking at the critical mass, helping everyone to see themselves in the picture, right? And allowing them to be included and feel a sense of belonging, even in my presence, right? I don't ever want anyone to feel like they can't be themselves, they can't say what they need to say or advocate for themselves in my presence. And so I think for me, when I think about leadership, and leadership for me is inspirational, very motivational, but at the end of the day, a key value for me is that justice lens of people being able to feel like I have a right to be here, I deserve to be here. And so for me, justice and diversity and equity, those are all competencies of leadership.
When you think through, I mean, first of all, that's a wonderful thing that your godmother would basically pour that into you at such an early age, say leaders are readers, as well as give you that type of administrative behind the scenes type of thing that a lot of people do not get. Most people's some of their areas of leadership that came as far as in church setting could be Sunday school teacher or a junior deacon, or those types of
Yeah,
things.
no, I never did none of them. I did none of them. I mean, I did none of
All of
them.
you who are junior deacons, she was letting you know that she was at a higher playing field with administrative tasks where y'all were trying to play church. She was helping to run the church and shape it at an early age. But I just think that that's good. And I did neglect to tell y'all that are listening or watching that she is also certified through John Maxwell's leadership program as well. So you do know that all of this loaded nugget of leadership stuff that you're hearing, even before then, she's always been loaded like this, but now she really has her guns blazing, because of this type of information. But I said that because one of the quotes I wrote down that I think that you continue to say a lot of hinge on, but Chad Veach, who is I think he's a pastor of a church called Boo Church, I believe. But he had a leadership quote that he said that leadership is a transfer of belief. And I thought that that was an interesting quote, but I sense that a lot of your leadership style has been expressed through your inner belief systems. How would you say about that? Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. And what's so interesting, and I'm glad that you mentioned about my relationship with the John Maxwell team because, as I later matriculated through, the church in terms of my career, right? But one of the ways that I did that is, and let me back up because also Black Diamond did play a major role in shaping who I was.
Now, for those
Black
of you
Diamond
who do not
Gospel
know
Choir.
what Black Diamond is, and I forgot as well, she made some references to different places that some of you all who are not from Kentucky have no clue what we're talking about. St. Stephen
Mhm.
Church in Louisville, Kentucky, under the pastor of Dr. Kevin Cosby. And now we're talking about Black Diamond Choir, which was of the University of Louisville, Kentucky, which, was, constantly attempting to sing better than the Kentucky State University Gospel Ensemble, of which I was the director over. They did well though. But proceed in your story. Proceed.
Right. Shade, but we're gonna keep moving.
I'll just play.
Um,
I play. I really honestly though, back in those times, those were really great times. A lot of honestly, I don't know what direction you were getting ready to go with that, but a lot of us who might not have had opportunities to lead a group of people, especially your peers, that was really a great experience. When I look back, I'm like, I was 19 and 20 and 21 leading or directing or making decisions for a choir of over 90 people or 100 people or whatever. Now I look at it like, why did they do that? But thinking of those times, it was great leadership that we didn't even know it was leadership. Had no clue. I would have never even called it leadership, but a lot of the things I do now I believe were shaped greatly during that time. So that was a really, really wonderful time when we would all come together and see each other and and what I love most about that particular time, and I don't know, I don't want to hinge into the season that we're in now, the times that we're in now, but I would say for the time that I remember when I was in school, we inspired each other. Like when we saw you all sing, or I'm just saying, just generally, it wasn't competition or whatever. It was just like y'all better sing, it was, and then we were like, y'all better come up, when y'all sing, you better be on your stuff. It was inspiration to do better and to aspire to grow or whatever. And I just those were really great times. So I don't know where you were going with that, but that was a really took me
no, but
back.
you went exactly where I was going. You went exactly where I was going because I think that's important to elevate that for your audience because innately, fortunately, that's who I am as an individual. But being in environments such as Black Diamond, even when you were talking, it made me even it brought up something because I did go to the great Central High School right here in Louisville, Kentucky, and so again, another environment and culture that I was able to be my authentic self and to live into those values and beliefs that you were speaking of through your quote. And what I know is that as I entered each of those environments, right, whether it was at the university, whether it is was in community, um, I know that it shaped me for where I am today, right? My I always go back to tell when people ask me, where did this all come from? I will tell people my grandmother was a community mover and shaker here in Louisville, Kentucky, and so specifically in West Louisville, and so um, it was non-negotiable, right? How we got involved in community and moving the critical mass. So when I think about that value and then going into the environment of the choir and thinking about like cultivating a sense of belonging, leadership for me is influence. And I often think about like my early years of leading it was really cultivated through community as well as through the church. And then, I think about the John Maxwell at the time. I mean, I was 18. No, I was 17 when I got my first John Maxwell book, which was the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And I say that it matters how we mentor and it matters how we model, right? For those who are coming behind us, those that we have the opportunity to be in relationship with. Because at the end of the day, what I know is that my value system aligned with that curriculum within the John Maxwell, and that's how I felt comfortable and confident enough to be able to lead and influence people who was much older, much more seasoned than I was, and even with my peers, like I might have changed a strategy to make it more fitting for them to be able to digest, but the basis of it still was a belief and a value in terms of integrity and respect. And so when I think about how we move now, it is a direct result of our belief system, that was cultivated in many different environments. And I'm gonna stay true to that, right? Because that's what I know how community has really shaped and influenced me into the person I am today.
So there's so many lanes I want to go through, but I can't because we'll be talking for the next 3 hours. But I used a quote, but one of the things I want to build on what you just last said, even speaking of today, John Maxwell has been, of course, quoted by saying often that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And he's also recently said during the pandemic and a lot that one of the recent podcasts he said recently, he said, what I've learned most about leadership and said, I'm still learning about leadership.
Absolutely.
Um, but he said in the pandemic something that stuck out to me, and I wanted you to speak on this from all areas, not just in our faith communities, not just in our local nonprofit communities, social communities, or social areas and spheres, but politically, nationally, locally, whatever. Is one thing he said is that we are in a leadership deficit. And I want to hear your thoughts on that, because I say that when I look back on those particular times that we did reference as far as in college and stuff, that sometimes I do seem to feel that we have more followers oftentimes than leaders. Now, I hinge that to say that a lot of times we have people who quote leadership but are not always leading. People who quote, often, so and so said or whatever, but your train record, your track is actually certifications in these things, actually, and creating systems and structures and things that are not quotes, but they're actually proven things that work. So when he says there's a leadership deficit, I wanted to see your thoughts on that, and how do we raise up more leaders, the people that are willing to rise up. I do feel that I'm not really sure you can make someone something that they are not. I'm not really sure of that. But I do
Mm.
I believe that you can identify, because your godmother identified something that was in you at an early age. But for those of us who are, whether leading organizations or whatever, like to be able to cause the egos to rise up, and to be able to pour into those people that you say, hey, you have a leadership edge. And I don't even know how you even point that out or see that. So it's loaded. I don't know how you're going to answer it because I'll say a whole lot.
Well, I think I want to start with, um, let me start here. So let me clarify that everyone is a leader. Let's start there. But there is positional leadership, right? So that's what you speak of in terms of titles, etc. And we all have the capability and the culpability to be able to be leaders. Okay. Capability meaning skill, talent, because it can be learned. Leadership can be learned. Okay. Culpability meaning being on the other side of leadership, being engaged in leadership, but just really needing to figure out your specific and technical lane in which you want to influence. Okay. And so I think when John is speaking of, and I absolutely agree that we are in a leadership deficit. Um, and I think that we have arrived there for a variety of reasons. You talked about the seven spheres of whether it's political, whether it is education, whether it is health, healthcare, all of the systems, right? All of the systems affect people. And I think sometimes we think systems assimilate people through, but we forget about the affect and the infection that causes people to react and respond. So if you don't have an individual in your life that says,
hold on.
Okay.
We just have to stop. You know how when somebody's preaching, you be like, hold on, say that again, preacher. Wait, you said not only how it affects, but it's infecting. Just yeah, develop that a little more, because I mean because when I think of infection, you can have an infection and not know it. You can be infected by something and not even realize that you are, being impacted by something you've been infected by, so that was just loaded. I didn't want to stop by. I didn't want to run by that.
No, but there are groups, there are individuals that have been infected. And there are eventually the infection will rise to the top, right? Because whether it's gonna kill you, okay, let's be honest, or if it is going to cause a serious injury, or no infection can go undiagnosed. No infection can go untreated because eventually the infection becomes fatal. So, when John, speaks about, a leadership deficit and being leadership sad, we have to recognize the way in which we have operated and we have functioned and we have lacked accountability as positional leaders and as just responsible citizens existing in multiple frames of society, right? Because when we think about our identities, they show up differently, right? I mean, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a cousin, right? So all of my different roles. And so what is our responsibility in regards to stop the bleeding, to treat the infection, right? And that is to produce more leaders. But leadership is rooted, number one, in your values. Number one, in your values. Number one, in your values. Number two, it is rooted in seeing people as people. Seeing people as people. And not necessarily the benefactors, right, of the inequities that have stood in or been held in place, have been held in place. And, that one of my philosophies has always been obedience is better than sacrifice. Because if I am obedient, it will cause me to sacrifice. And to be okay with that, right? As a leader, because there are times that my goal as a leader is always to help rise people up, but it's not my journey to hold, it's theirs. And so sometimes the inspiration is just not enough, right? So then we have to go back and we have to look at the root cause, and that is the lack of self awareness, the lack of self efficacy, the lack of self advocacy. So we have to deal. It really, Mario. When I think about this, honestly, we have some self work to do, right? And until we as a society recognize that we need to deal with the harms within ourselves, not just societal harms, but that which it has perpetuated onto you. And when you recognize that, you can do something about it. Yeah. And what I recognized that early on, even though, my dad was an alcoholic, my parents divorced early. There's so many reasons why I uh, should not be successful, right? But what I know without a shadow of a doubt is that my growth and the position and the posture of seeing our community in a place where it is befitting for us all and that we all have capacity and can make a contribution towards it.
I just your whole there's two things that kept jumping out to me when you were talking. One is that leadership is always about others, and propelling and pushing others forward. And I think that that's important. That's one point, because sometimes people have an skewed view of leadership and thinking that leadership is about getting just a bunch of people beneath you, or getting a bunch of people to do your bidding, or to set up this particular kingdom type of thing. You all just kind of do what I want you to do, and I sit back and enjoy the fruits of that. And then secondly, when you continue to circle back around to doing the self work, and doing the internal thing, because if you don't do what is internal, the hardest person to lead, in my opinion, is me. Is myself.
Oh yes, I agree.
And I, as I say often, I am a 24-hour job, just me. So
Sometimes I get on my own nerves.
listen, listen.
I had one of them days yesterday. So I get on my own nerves. What is going on here? What is really going on?
So I said that as far as leadership is concerned, one of the things before we wrap up, and I don't even want to wrap up, but we don't want this to be that conversation that goes on and never ends.
We can do a part two.
Yes. I think back to some early days in just the faith community, in one of the communities I was raised in. And I'm making this broad because I know some people are watching or listening that are not a part of the faith community. It's just for context for me. And sometimes I remember you would hear someone pray, and somebody would automatically say, "Oh, you praying like a deacon. Oh, you praying like," or somebody would get up and do the announcements or read the scripture and stuff. "Oh, you a preacher," whatever. Is it possible to mistake great talent for great leadership?
Absolutely. Oh, do you ask that question beautifully? Ooh. Because I have to go back to my friend John Maxwell when he says, when you're taking a walk and no one is following you, you're not a leader.
Yes. Yes. He said you're just going to go for a good
You
walk.
just go for a good walk.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
But
I see
it's
that dangerous, because we, sometimes mistake charisma and talent, and I think one of his books I read, The Leader's Results or something, they did talk about how you need to develop talent, but talent cannot be mistaken for leadership. Talent alone or charisma alone might woo, and attract, but it doesn't necessarily get results and movement or whatever.
yeah. No, relationships is a key tenet uh of leadership, and being able to manage those relationships and to understand and going back to the point earlier talking about self, your first relationship is with yourself, right? And then how you treat yourself is how you treat others.
And that's not always
That's true, right? And so what I feel like, at the end of the day, when we think about like, you know folks who have that talent and that charisma, um and how they navigate the treatment of people, right? It says a lot about their leadership perspective, their their uh, capacity to be able to impact the masses. See, that's the other key for me. Like, I've always thought about leadership in a stewardship manner, right? So, being honest and truthful and protecting that and caring for that and valuing that in a way that is gentle and nurturing, and so when we think about transferring those skills to the critical mass, I mean, for me, like, that's the way you do it, right? You start with one and then there will be many, right? But if you can't be a steward over one, I can only imagine what the many would look like, right? And so again, there is some truth to leadership being an innate ability, and I do have that. It is very natural for me. um when I think about the energy, sometimes I walk in rooms and I may not necessarily want to be the person that is making the decision or leading the way or providing direction or strategy, but I've tried to walk away from it, and it pulls me right back in, right? And I also know the ability, as I work with, a lot of positional leaders in corporate, community leaders, in nonprofit organizations. What I know is that a lot of times what ends up happening is that I excel in helping them to adapt and to be flexible in their leadership style. So it was funny when you introduced me and you said, a leader of leaders, because I think as I continue to do the great work that we're doing, I recognize that I am a leader of leaders. My patience level, my patience, my patience. I am a leader of leader, and I want to see results for the critical mass, and for individuals as well, because I know it starts individually and it's influence. But what I know is that people deserve and they want to be led well. And when you're in positional leadership, you have the capability and the opportunity to be able to help cultivate and foster people being led well. And so for me, that's crucial in today's time. It's crucial.
Would you say that it's important, even if you are naturally charismatic or gifted, to, as you just said, to know your leadership style and to know your, I think there's people outside of my studio, that you need to know your leadership style as well as know your areas of weakness that you need to staff or to cover. And I say that because those, because talent alone after can sometimes be a smokescreen by which people are attracted to that, and that smokescreen can make it appear as if everything is well and great until you realize that it's turf, it's not real grass, or any of those type of things. For myself, I've realized, that I'm not always the fine print person or the detailed, and always, I'm the vision person. I'm thinking big. So I have to have somebody who's going to ask, so how do you think we're going to fund that? Or how do you think, or whatever. I'll be like, I hadn't thought about that, but it's a good idea, isn't it? So I have to, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It just means I have to know that about myself. I'm going to be the vision person. I don't have a problem speaking in front of the people. I don't have a problem with, being that, like we're talking right now. I have no issue with that. But I have to make sure I surround myself with people who are asking the questions, who are thinking long term, that are, thinking beyond me and not afraid to say that to me. And I have to also be receptive to knowing that those people are there for those reasons, because you need a balancer. If you don't have a
That's
balancer,
right.
we all gonna be in debt, type of thing.
Yeah.
So do you believe that's important for leaders to know their leadership styles?
Oh yeah. So we talk about being self-aware, right? You're talking about self-awareness again. And absolutely, like, I'm the same way. You, you know, the unique perspective about me is that I am a visionary. Part of my giftedness is to be able to see beyond where we are in that moment, but also, so my personality, I'm an influencer, I'm dominant, and then I'm conscientious, right? And so the influencer of my personality is, oh, I love every single person. I could talk to every single person, right? The dominant style of my personality is that I can be very direct, right? Which we talked about early on in the conversation. The conscientious perspective of my personality, which is very low, I just need enough information to be dangerous. Just enough information to come to right this decision that I need to make under my direct personality style. And so it's so interesting because you have to know yourself and know the functionality, because we could just talk about something as simple as marriage, right? I've been married close to, it'll be 20 years next year for me. I'm an IDC personality. My husband is a very steady and conscientious personality. He is going to ask the questions. He's going to vacillate where I am quick thinking. I am quick to have an answer and not even have all the information. So as you talked about, we need the balance of the both. The other thing is that I think it's important for us to talk about polarizing, right? Because oftentimes that's a big word when we talk about leadership. It has to be one way. This is the only way, right? And polarization is just not the way we need to be moving in terms of our society, in terms of our decisions, because things can be both and, right? We can be multidimensional. We are multidimensional because we are complex beings, right? With different experiences and how we show up, how we lead, how we influence, how we engage. And so, it's important for you to understand who you are. So going back to the self-awareness, understanding your self-recognition, how those behaviors come out and they influence and impact the culture and environment that you're in, but also for us to say, okay, how has that impacted, or how does it impact the people that are around me? That's accountability, right? It helps us to have a frame of understanding when we know that we're going to be a pioneer in this particular area. However, though, we may not necessarily have the hesitators and the obstructors won over just yet because they got more questions, right? And so being able to balance both, and as we are talking about, like, understanding ourselves and what is the best way to develop your leadership style, because ultimately opportunities grow out of our weaknesses, and our blind spots.
Okay. How would you say that?
So, you know,
Is that a
we
one?
make lots of, you know, as an entrepreneur, you know, I learn this all the time. You know, I fail every day. I feel every single day, do I fail or do I make a mistake? And oftentimes it is the greatest opportunity to close the gap and create capacity for people to utilize their skill sets based off my weaknesses, based off my blind spots, right? So leveraging their capabilities and allowing them to do things in a way that closes the gap for me, right? As I have, you know, as I'm fallible, and I will say that in a heartbeat. Listen, I am not perfect, right? But I am always evolving when we talk about growth. And when we leave room for people to learn and grow and to seize those opportunities that may be gaps for me, ultimately we are developing leaders. We're increasing the trust thrust with individuals so that they therefore can build their confidence so that they will be able to be competent and confident in the decisions that they make that benefits the sphere of influence that they are responsible for, right? So the statistic is uh, we at least on a day-to-day basis are responsible for 7 people. They're not the same 7 people. But when we recognize the law of multiplication, right? So I've been in relationship just today. I probably from the time I woke up till the time it is now, I've influenced probably a few hundred people because I've been in relationship just today with a few hundred people, right? This afternoon will bring its own set of folks. But on a daily basis, you have the ability to influence 7 people. The law of multiplication says, well, then they have the ability to influence 7 people. Then there's 7 more people, and on and on and on. And I think again, this is why I frame leadership a lot in stewardship, because my decisions and my recognition as to who I am, being emotionally intelligent, being aware of my human behavior and being responsible for it, it then influences the choices and decisions and the responsibilities that I am holding myself true to. Right. And that's how we will change the world. Right. That's how we will move from deficit mindset to asset based mindset. And oftentimes, what has happened, and what John's point is when we talk about being leadership sad and being in a deficit, is really around that context of because we have become so tunneled, thinking that there is only one way, one right way, and it only affects me and mine, then we forget about the ultimate responsibility of the law of multiplication that allows us to be able to have influence in other people's lives. And that's leadership. Knowingly or unknowingly, you're doing it.
I feel that if I have been in a leadership class today, for those of you all who are watching or listening, you should feel as if you have been gifted by design to hear this conversation and to be a part of this. I wanted to ask you, what are your top leadership books?
Ooh, good question. Top leadership book is 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Um, let me see. Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice is not really a leadership book per se. It does not fall in the category of a leadership book. However, though, there are some principles, business principles, but also leadership principles such as persistence, self-reliance, all of those things that are inside of that book. The Dennis Kimbrough, and let me just tell you, Dennis Kimbrough is one of my all-time He's one of my, that is my uncle, and he don't even know it.
Well, if you're listening, Dennis, you just heard it. You better come get your niece.
I love Dennis Kimbrough. Um, and then that's what I say. Look, I gotta turn around and look.
I mean, you do have like a huge bookshelf of books.
Yeah, I do because leaders are readers,
I read.
right? And I got one in front of me too.
It is very interesting
And
though, sometimes when I talk to different people who say they're leaders, and I sometimes ask them what they're reading, and they can't say, you know, like you're leading what? It's very interesting. I don't usually say anything. I'm usually thinking like,
hmm.
Okay,
Hmm. And
note
for
to
me,
self.
I am number one, I'm a speed reader. And because I serve at a very large and high capacity, so the times that I get to read what I want to read, um, how I want to read it, right, is really dictated by the season that I'm in. So, for example, I say that like we're coming up on the holidays. So, there's several books. I can't even think of all the books that I have bought as a result of me reading over the holidays, right? But generally, my reading is really captured and cultivated as a result of the work, right? Because I have to stay up on reading. I've got to be studying constantly. I have to be growing because if you're not growing, you're not leading. If you're not growing, you're not leading. I can't say that enough. A lot of times, and you talked about this earlier, you was like, some people think, you just arrive to this place and you don't. Like this for me, it's a calling. It's not my career, it's a calling. Gifted by Design is a company, but it's a vehicle that which has allowed and allows me to really lean into Change Your World, which is another book, right? Another book that is really important to me. Love Works by Joel Manby is a really important book to me. We're going to be hosting an event in 2023, early 2023, around a new kind of diversity, where it talks about intergenerational, how do we navigate those relationships and appreciate the beauty around that? So and I say all that to say that ultimately, um, we should be constantly digesting leadership material, whether it's Simon Sinek, right? I love Simon Sinek. I love Les Brown, Valerie Burton. For different reasons, I could just name countless books, but I'll stop.
What I have learned, I interviewed a guest one time. He has his platform is called I Love Books, which I was very intrigued just by that. I said, it didn't say I read books, I heard of books, but I love books, But one of the things we talked about in it, and you referenced it, is that it seems that everyone in areas of success or leadership or whatever are often reading the same books. Like they're timeless things. When you said Les Brown, Simon Sinek, Dennis Kimbrough, all these different people, they are usually some of the things, sometimes Craig Rochelle, Andy Stanley, there are things that people are going to, those are the go-to books. So when you do hear someone who's leading and you ask them what they're reading and they're like, Shade Room, you're like, oh no, 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 no. So it's good to us hear that, because leadership is can be transferred, it's timeless, it doesn't stop, you're always growing. So, but anyhow, I have been totally inspired by this conversation, as well as I hope those of you who are watching or listening as well. And I wanted to you to tell the people where they can follow you, and they can maybe, some people might need to get you to come in and do consultant work for them, and to do that analysis that you so eloquently did earlier on some of our organizations. I plan to make sure that we use you in our particular organization, one of the organizations I'm a part of, really, really soon, because we need all those types of analysis and things as well. So how can people follow you?
People can follow me on all the social media platforms, Lettie Johnson or Gifted by Design LLC. We work with individuals and groups, organizations in all seven spheres. Been very fortunate to be able to be at the forefront of reimagining leadership locally, nationally, internationally, as well as being able to support people one to one. Through coaching and training and development, whether it be life, leadership, all things helping you to be better as an individual as well as our society as a community. And yeah, you can follow me. You can find us on the website at www.giftedbydesign.net. And I'm really easy. I'm really, that's one of the things that I feel like that is a part of leadership is being able to be accessible. So, like, I am very public, and sometimes that gets me in trouble. But I am very, very accessible, and I feel like I have an obligation to be available to the greater community. My phone number has been the same phone number for over 20 years, and again, sometimes that's good, and sometimes it can be concerning. However, we just take it with a grain of salt, and we keep it moving because I will, my team sometimes are looking at me kind of crazy, and but I feel like it's a part of my duty to be accessible to people and affordable to all people, right? Because I feel like leadership and growth should be in the reach of and that was the reason why we started Gifted by Design, because we know that formal education is not for everybody, but some type of learning, some system of learning is should be available to everybody, right? And so it was just something with that God had placed in my heart. And so yeah, so we work with individuals as well as groups in the areas of leadership, as well as justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
Well, I appreciate you again for having this conversation. Those of you who are listening and are watching, you now have your marching orders. Leadership is a gift that can be developed. And you want to pour into yourself, invest in yourself, stretch yourself, do self-care on yourself, do all that stuff so that the organizations or the people or the community which you lead, whether it be 7 people, 17 people, or whatever, can be better because you are better. Until next time, y'all tune into our next episode, but you continue to embrace your own unique design.